The first American president I ever came into contact with was Bill Clinton. The magazine said, we want a nice, dignified headshot. I thought to myself, look, I'm never going to be in front of another president ever again anyway, so I might as well do the picture that I was born to do. I shouted out, Mr. President, will you show me the love? And there was silence in the room. I think his chief of staff leaned forward and said, Mr. President, whatever you do not show him the love. But Clinton then says, shut up, I know what he means. He puts his hands on his knees and gives me that Clinton charisma. It became an icon of controversy, dubbing it as the crotch shot, that it's all about sex, that the tie is actually an arrow, that the face is smiling, saying, I got away with the biggest sex scandal ever. It wasn't about any of those things. It was about charisma. He's a rock and roll president.
I was there illegally photographing. I've got the only pictures of the bodies. These issues we're dealing with, the suffocation of the land, the suffocation of diverse nature, the killing of the species is unbelievable. Do you know how many species we've eliminated just in our lifetime? It's tragic.
When I was 17, I met Andy Warhol and asked if I could come to his studio to photograph. And as soon as I went there, realized that was more interesting than going to high school. So this is what I did instead of going to college. I spent 3 years on and off photographing at the factory. This picture was made probably within the first week or two of my going to the factory. And it's a picture of me and Andy. And I guess this will go down in history as being my first selfie.
Off as a graffiti artist. My whole crew was basically graffiti artists. And I dabbled into it in the beginning, but I wasn't really good at it. And I had a name Comanche, you know what I mean? And as a graffiti artist, you don't get names like that. You know what I mean? You get names with basically two letters. Like most of my partners were A.G., K.O., La Boy, but Comanche was just long. And I remember writing it. It took so long to write. It was like, it gotta be a better way. You know what I mean? So, you know, that was my humble beginnings. Like I said, all of my friends were graffiti artists at that time, and it would definitely played a role in my development and appreciation for art, because that was basically my first contact with art, was graffiti back then. And I just regret not photographing the trains back then, because I thought they would be around forever. So I would see this great graffiti and it would just bypass me, and then one day it was all gone. But graffiti today and my work goes basically hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. And what's crazy about graffiti with my book, I have people looking at my book and saying, man, you have my friend in your book. And I'm saying, really? He said, yeah, you got him. He's from the Bronx. I said, wait a minute, I don't remember taking that guy's picture. And they go to me and say, he's right there. I said, wait a minute, you gotta be kidding me? That's your friend? And that's his cousin. You know what I mean? And it makes me feel good that I've touched people like that the photography is beyond an image, but you know, it's just hand in hand. Like this shot here, you know, they say, yeah, you got my brothers there. I said, well, your brother is two girls. They said, that's my brother right in the background. So I feel really good that my work enabled me to capture certain elements of graffiti. Whereas a lot of times we see images of the outside of the train, but very few people shot the inside of the train, and that's my relationship with it. So we go hand in hand, and I feel good that I preserved the history to that degree, and it's a beautiful thing.
It was the right time of history, the right time of the right man of that time of history. This was photographed 2-3 weeks after Pearl Harbor, and during the darkest hour in the history of this free world. And photographed him in Ottawa soon after he had addressed the combined House of Senate and Congress in Washington. And you recall that very familiar saying of his, which was essence of defiance, some chicken, some neck. And I saw this attitude and I photographed him immediately after that in Ottawa. But evidently he was not prepared to be photographed. He had a cigar in his mouth. I managed to disarm him of the cigar, but ever so delicately and so respectfully. And after the defiant image he gave me, he straightened up. He said, you can take another one. And this is the one we gave him immediately afterward. And what is extraordinary about this photograph, it was a symbol of the determination and the
The British Bulldog.
British Bulldog, precisely. And one of your former commentator colleague, Edward R. Morrow, when he saw this portrait of Churchill, he said, here's the man who marshaled the English language and sent it into battle when we had little else.
And other times, like when I was with Chet, you know, it really started from a photo session, you know, that I had with Chet, where I went down to a little nightclub. He hadn't played in America in so long. He was in there, and how I knew he was in town, I was standing on the corner of 57th and 5th, right by Tiffany, and it was snowing out. And it was such a beautiful morning, late morning in New York City. And I was crossing the street, and there, stopped at the light, was Chet Baker in a convertible with the top down, with all the snow coming on him. And he had on a little tweed sport coat, and I think he had a t-shirt. And he looked really frail. And I went, oh my God, there's Chet Baker. And so I knew he was in town, and I found out where he was playing. And I went downtown to the club to listen to him play, and it was real empty. And so I walked up to him and I said, hey Chet, hi, my name is Bruce Weber, I'm a photographer, you know. And it's always funny for me to say that because I really love saying it, you know, because I have to say it all my life, and I'm really proud that I do, you know. I never want to walk around and think I never have to introduce myself. You know, that's maybe good for actors, you know, but I'm a photographer. I'm on the other side of the camera like you guys are right now. And so I said, can I take a portrait of you? And he said, sure. And he said, oh, and could I have my girlfriend be in the picture too? And I said, sure, let's start with you and we'll put her in. And then I said, well, what are you doing now? And he says, well, I'm going to play tonight, and then I'm going to be here tomorrow, and then I leave for California. And I said, well, how about this? I said, could I come and see you tomorrow? And maybe we do a little filming and take some more pictures. And so a lot of my films happen in that way, you know.
I treated him principally as a man of letters, and he reads. As you mentioned the reading of Camus earlier, and others, Sartre, and Hemingway, etc. And as such, he is a fascinating man as a human being. But as a politician, that's something else.
I remember I saw Mr. Lieberman call me in his office because he was frustrated because I always said no to American Vogue. And they said, what is happening? My editors tell me that you not want to work for us. You know who we are? And I said, yes, I know. But he said, what is the reason? And I said, I can't photograph this kind of woman. It's just impossible. I'm totally demotivated. I'm not inspired. And then he was like looking at me like, yes, young man. And he said, why don't you go somewhere, wherever you want to go, and take an editor, any editor you like from us, and then you come back with the woman you like and show it to us, no? And I did it. I went to Los Angeles with like Christy, Tatiana, Linda already, and Karen Alexander, and 6 girls. And I shot them in a quite different way, just in white shirts, because I didn't get it right, because I was thinking they want me just to show them like a casting picture. And they were imagining a fashion story, just a little bit different hairstyle, I think. So not so much. Now, when I came back with the pictures, they looked at me, they looked at each other, and they said, what shall we do with this? And I said, I don't know, you asked me to bring pictures to you for the woman I like. That is the woman I like. And then he said, like, okay, thank you very much. And then see you next time in 100 years or something. And that was it. And then a little later, Anna Wintour came to Vogue, like not even 6 months later. And in the meantime, the editor who was in charge then had to change his job. And Anna saw the pictures and said, you know, I would have given you the cover and 20 pages. So it was just 6 months too early.
Essential goodness and greatness. There's a great deal of compassion in those eyes. And I remember he was the first person where I put in a tape recorder after asking him if we may record the few naive questions I may put before him and his answers. He said, why not, why not? But suddenly I became intimidated for the first time and the only occasion where I find this machine was intimidating me. So I took it out and only we produced it afterward, only to discover that He had imparted to us a great deal of wisdom about the future of the world. And when the great humanitarian died, the great scientist, Canada used a segment of this profound thought of his as a tribute to him.
With Putin, I think that was the first moment I ever had to deal with this sense of intimidation. He walks in with this giant entourage that makes P. Diddy look like Mickey Mouse. I nervously said, "Mr. President, it's a great honor to be in your fine country. I have a question for you. Before we take the picture, I want you to know that I'm an Englishman and I love the Beatles. And I would like to know if you like the Beatles." He says, "I love the Beatles." I said, "Oh my God, I didn't know you spoke English." He said, "I speak perfect English." I said, "Well, who's your favorite Beatle?" And he said, "Paul." "Wow, what's your favorite song? Is it Back in the USSR?" And he said, "No, it's Yesterday. Think about it." I ended up 1.5 inches away from his nose. And that's how I got the truth. This is the cold face of power in Russia.
One of the last photographs done of Kurt Cobain. I had a kind of a unique relationship with Kurt. The first time I photographed the band, I asked them not to wear t-shirts with writing on it. And Kurt showed up with a t-shirt that had corporate magazine Still Suck written on it. We ran the picture on the cover of the magazine, which was pretty spectacular that they did that. Kind of honored his wishes. And the next time I photographed him was for the In Utero album, and he very patiently and very generously posed for this portrait. It was in between a moment, and I think he let his guard down, and you can really see this kind of melancholy in his face that is so I think surprising of his character at the time. Seemingly he was doing well, and then he wasn't.
I was told that if you want to endear yourself to Hemingway, you must appreciate his favorite cocktail, and that was daiquiri. So immediately as I arrived to Havana, I went directly to the La Floridita club and tried to do my homework there. And as I sipped the first cocktail of daiquiri, there was a revolution broke all around me. They were firing. So rather than to surrender the drink, I sat down on the carpet and enjoyed it. And the next day when we met him, early morning, when the American ambassador took me to introduce me to him, the official left early in the morning, about 8:30, and suddenly Hemingway went to the kitchen and shouted, "Karsh, what will you have to drink?" I said, "Daiquiri, sir." Oh, he said, "Good God, at this hour of the day?" So this is often, I mention to would-be young photographer that sometimes excessive preparation can play boomerang.
Well, I really do separate myself in some way, you know, when I go to work. But, you know, the Miley picture was a beautiful, strong, you know, simple picture. I mean, we took all kinds of pictures that day, and it turned out to be one of the strongest pictures. You know, I think you know it's actually sort of innocent. On some level, but I feel like that, you know, she loved the pictures and she loved taking that picture, and she was ready to take that picture, and it's just, you know, her audience, you know, wasn't ready to take that picture, wasn't ready for that picture, and the thing that it was just different. The picture, you know, it was really different of her. I've said this now in another place, but basically I think that if there was any mistake made, it's probably that she shouldn't have posed for Vanity Fair. You know, that's my recent take on it.
I was photographing at 57th Street between 5th and 6th Avenue. A policeman came up to me and said, "You're a photographer?" And I'm standing with an 8x10. I said, "Yep." And he said, "I'm a photographer too." He said, "I use a 4x5. So we started talking, and we were talking for a while, and he asked my name, and I told him, he said, "I have one of your books, and I show it to my family, and they think your pictures are boring, and I tell them they don't understand." And so that sums up the reaction to my work for years, is some people think it's boring, and other people say, "Oh, you don't understand."
I had the opportunity, I wanted to photograph Obama in his last days in office, and you know, the White House kept putting off the shoot, and then finally it was like 2 weeks before he was supposed to leave the White House, and I get a call that I could come on Thursday at 2 o'clock the next week, and I said, that's the last day he's there, and it was just, so moving to me to be there. The desk was cleared. That night, they packed up their stuff, and it was inauguration the next day.
Well, my biggest love, of course, is taking pictures. That's my biggest love. When I proposed to my wife, June, I said, and she's made a movie on me that was shown on this TV in France, and she quoted me in that movie. I said to her, photography will always be my first love, and you will be my second.
When I did that catalog, that was not easy to do as well. That because at the time, Pirelli were a kind of like what they had done in the past was like a kind of sexy women, pushing the sexuality thing, and also there was always an element of fashion in the mixture. And that was something that I thought, I'd really like to do something really pure and strip it down completely, and not do sexy, but do, kind of pure existential portraits in a way of women, and really do that. And they were like a little scared of it. They were a little freaked out. They were like, oh, we're not sure, if it's right, if it's Pirelli in this, and and also to be able to like make that box and take them out from the world that they were so comfortable in, that was kind of a struggle. And I think as an artist, I think you're always trying to push people a little bit to a place where maybe they're not so comfortable, but it's like a step forward. The Pirelli catalog was still as well kind of pushed to a place that, you did have to have a structure, and they wanted you to photograph renowned models and actresses. Okay. So you kind of do have restrictions and parameters in that world as well, Maybe today, because it's so become more open, and the idea of being more inclusive is the trend, that would be different and stuff. But in my career, if you look at my work, I've been photographing women of all sizes since the beginning and stuff. And I get super inspired by women that are voluptuous, and that takes me back to the painting. And again, that's like something very part of my education as an artist.
What I did instead of going to college was go to the factory, and Andy would often give me advice, like parental advice about, oh, you shouldn't say that kind of thing. If I made some crack in a social situation that he thought was inappropriate, he would tell me. The factory was a real turning point for me because I started thinking aesthetically in a way I hadn't before.
I was led into Mark Zuckerberg's office where we were going to do the picture. His neck was tense, his eyes were wide open, and he almost resisted every opportunity I made to connect with him. And then I said to him, you've succeeded more than any other person I've ever met on the planet, but you must have failed along the way. And when you fail, how do you cope with failure? He looked at me and he said, there is no failure. I just love what I do. So I said, show me. And everything changed. It's extraordinary what a simple question can do that connects with his value system.
This was one of the last sessions that I did with Brad. So we're pretty lo-fi on the shoot. My producer was driving the car. I was on top of the roof, and Brad was riding next to us. And so this was our great fearless stunt moment where, yes, I do my own stunts, thank you.
people who really dress great, you know. I think of a painter I photographed, Georgia O'Keeffe. I was with Calvin Klein one time with Miss O'Keeffe, and he said, "Oh, I love that Calder pin you have on, and that black robe with the belt and everything, it's so great." And she said, "Well, I decided at a certain age I picked a uniform, and I decided I was going to wear it the rest of my life." And he said, "Well, it's really good that you chose black." The next day, I was at our house again in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and it was very warm out, and for some strange reason, she was quite elderly at this time, and she was becoming blind, which was really sad, and they had given her the same version of her outfit in pink. And Calvin said to her, "Oh, Miss O'Keeffe, I really like you in that black, you're black better than pink." And she said, "Well, it's nice to make a little change once in a while, you know, it's still my uniform."
I remember vividly when I met my wife. I had a retoucher working in my studio, and she said, "I have a girlfriend who's an actress, and she wants to make some extra money." So in comes what turned out to be June, and so she was very pretty. So I did what every young photographer does. I said, "Come back after 7 o'clock, and I take some test pictures of you." And she came back, and I tried to layer, of course, like every young photographer does, but it didn't work immediately. It took quite a while. Then I ended, and then she was the first actress I'd ever met.
That was a turning point, not just for you, but for fashion photography, for American Vogue, and it was kind of Avedon's dominance.
Yeah, after 15 years of Avedon, that was very embarrassing. No, that was embarrassing for me, and there's a story. No, I should not tell the story, but I mean that was funny because nobody talked cover so much. Anna said, "You know, we're going to take a cover from the story." And we were shooting on Place La Concorde with Nikon, no tripod, no, I mean, little camera. And it was very fresh and easy. And I was thinking, there was a top, see, La Croix, I remember the fashion, with like a big cross with stones, very sophisticated, it was haute couture, no? And a little bit of stomach. And then I said, leave your pants on, leave your pants on. We cropped that anyway, because the magazine is shorter than the format of the negative. No? And at the end, what happened was I had to leave space, so when they crop, so it's still like here, not here. No? And Anna was brave enough to put that on the cover because she loved the idea with the jeans. And today, like 25 years later, or some 30 years later, it's a big thing, the first jeans on the cover of Vogue. I mean, yeah, everything what you should not do for cover, what it was before, she just cut off. She really wanted to make a point, no? And she did. And that was shocking, no? That cover was shocking. And that shows the courage she had. That was amazing to do that.
Click with Shabazz, I had 30 seconds and I got one frame. But he gave me his personality on a plate and he knew it. He got up, he turns round, puts his fist in the air like a power salute and he shouts, "Platon!" It was just the most extraordinary moment.
George magazine that most of you will not know, I would bet. But George magazine was actually a brilliant magazine. It was an American political magazine that came out in about 1995-ish. And the head of it was Kennedy's son, John Kennedy, who was actually a very lovely chap. He's a chap that died in a plane crash. Anyway, he phoned me up and said, "Hi, it's John Kennedy," which was a shock in itself. And he said, "I want you to come to America and I want you to photograph Robert De Niro. I'll just get him on the phone for you." So then I had Robert De Niro on the phone. So all these things are quite strange because they're huge characters. But it was made even more difficult by the fact that, as Carrie says, the idea for the front cover, which I was doing of this magazine, was they'd riff off the idea of the image of George Washington. So the first one, I think they had somebody they had somebody dressed up. Cindy Sherman,
Crawford.
Cindy Crawford, that's Cindy. That's Cindy Crawford dressed up as George Washington. That's my wife. She's very good at prompting me on these things. And the second one I had to do with De Niro, so they put him in a bloody George Washington wig, but De Niro was promoting his film Casino, so he wanted his say in it, so he had the George Washington sword with a playing card stuck on it in a 1950s suit. So this kind of mixed match of these two images. It's very hard to get a portrait of someone who's got all that going on. And in fact, when you look at Robert De Niro, when you look into his eyes, you see the same eyes that you see in Taxi Driver, in Cape Fear, in all those other terrifying movies that he's been in. And also you think, well, any minute, this man, last time I saw him looking at my eyes, he stuck a pen in somebody's ear. So you kind of slightly unpleasant feeling, but actually he was a very nice chap, and so was Kennedy.
This is Norman Soper with his prize-winning leak. This is at the Samwell show, and he had a picture about 9 meters high outside the gallery when we showed it in Walsall, which of course absolutely flummoxed him.
You plan something, you know, I could be photographing you right now, and we could be hearing these bells, and I would say, well, wait a second, let's go to church and take some pictures, you know? And I'm looking at your hair and thinking about you during your first communion, and I'm thinking, wow, that would be so beautiful, you know, to go to church now and photograph you with all the other people in there, you know, praying. I was in Paris a while ago, a couple years ago, and I was photographing the French cinema's bad boy, Louis Garrel. And he's a real character and always getting in trouble and really difficult. And we were in this little section of Paris, and I said, oh, Louis, let's go to church, you know. I think he thought I was going to ask him to take off all his clothes, you know, and lay down on the floor and roll around and get a girl with him and everything, you know. And I just remember being in church with him, you know, and he looked so beautiful, and he was like a little kid again, so it was great, you know. Then we got outside, and then some kids were playing soccer, and so he joined the soccer game, and so it became our world together.
And I remember telephone H.G. Wells, which is the opposite photograph, and he immediately said, come over this afternoon. I said, I'm sorry, sir, I'm photographing the Archbishop of Canterbury. Well, come tomorrow. I said, tomorrow, I'm very sorry, I'm photographing Shaw. So ultimately, when I went to photograph H.G. Wells, he said, I see you've been wasting a little bit of your talent photographing George Bernard Shaw. And then he said, when the future generation unearth the ruins of London, they will see Shaw, more Shaw, and more Shaw's photographs. But unfortunately, they will take him to be the typical Englishman. So this great intellect, they always had a little intellectual duel among themselves.
I worked with Donald Trump quite a while ago, but even back then there was this chaos and madness that surrounded him. I remember saying to him, Donald, how do you weather the storm? It's madness around you wherever you go, whatever you do, whatever you say. There's this sort of frenetic energy. Suddenly this quiet calm came over him, and he said, I am the storm. All this sort of frenetic, crazy energy and sense of chaos. It's very easy for Donald to navigate through that because he created it. And it's actually us that can't cope with it. So probably more world leaders have sat on this box than any other chair on the planet. Gaddafi sat on that box, and Putin. So not all bottoms are good bottoms.
Stone, I had an assignment to do a portfolio for their 25th anniversary. And my first subject was Fleetwood Mac. So I remember getting on the phone, I was super nervous, never really talked to somebody that was that big of a rock star. And I said, hey Mick, it's Mark. The idea that I have is that you and John will be doing a wedding portrait. And he says, oh, I love that idea. He goes, can I ask you a favor? And I said, absolutely. He goes, can I be the bride? This was the final picture that made it, where sure enough, Mick Fleetwood was wearing a bride's gown and John McVie was the groom. He's a big guy.
When I was doing Gaddafi, I knew that this is going to be a moment where the story is summed up. I've never experienced a chilling sense of menace and defiance. He's not really posing for me, he's posing for America.
For example, John and Yoko, you know, I only took a few frames. I mean, you knew it was good. I mean, you hadn't seen anything like it before, and It was beautiful, and it had form and strength, and it was simple, and it told a story. And, so you certainly know when it's not working. You know, it just doesn't feel, you know, great. It just and over the years I've learned to just say, okay, just move on. You know, it's just, you know, trying to. It doesn't get better. Keep you know, when you keep trying to work on something, and I'd rather just come back to it or come back another day.
There I am in front of Putin, asking him about the Beatles. I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble or if I'm not. But with Putin, you have to go in close because no one gets close to Putin.